Excellent. Um, Thank you for coming. Um, I want to start with a, a meditation. It's from the Sufi tradition, and it has taken me many places in my life. This is a lesson in following the way. Remember it. How do you follow the way? Go where you are sent. Wait till you are shown what to do. Do it with the whole self. Remain until you have done what you were sent to do. Walk away with empty hands. What is the cost? The cost is everything, for all you are and all you have will be asked of you before the journey runs its course. How will you know your fellow travelers? Their faces will be marked by the scars of love. No one will ever tell you that the way is easy, only that it is possible. No one can tell you if the journey is worthwhile, for your wages are concealed in the hand of God and will be shown you only on the last day of eternity. But whoever chooses to follow the way will have the joyous company of God's beloved fools as fellow travelers, and a resting place at journey's end in the Mecca of the heart. This is the lesson on following the way. Remember it. So, the journey I'm going to share with you all this evening could be dated from many beginnings. Perhaps began on March 1st, 1961, when John F. Kennedy created the Peace Corps. In a speech at the University of Michigan during his campaign, Kennedy spoke the quote that's there on the screen. How many of you who are going to be doctors are willing to spend your days in Ghana? On your willingness to do that, not merely to serve 1 or 2 years in service, but on your willingness to contribute part of your life to this country, I think will depend the answer whether a free society can compete. I think it can, and I think Americans are willing to contribute, but the effort must be far greater than we have ever made in the past. Well, I was a toddler at the time, so I really didn't know what Kennedy was talking about. That changed in 1964 when my oldest brother graduated from Wheeling College, got married, and moved to India as a Peace Corps volunteer. For 2 years, Bob and Pat worked with farmers, had their first child, and shared in letters home how they were trying to bring modern methods to a third world country, whether the country wanted them or not. Maybe the beginning of this adventure was the summer of 2016 when I decided to stop putting up with the frustrations of my job and chose adventure. Things happened rapidly after that. In May of 2017, I had bariatric bypass surgery, eventually losing over 100 pounds. In February 2018, I turned 60 and took my first trip abroad. The first weekend of October 2018, I attended a Maine library conference, an annual conference that I'd been going to for decades. I heard a speaker talking about partnering with school libraries in the Caribbean with school libraries in Maine. As an aside, she mentioned that most of the libraries in the Caribbean nations had been started by Peace Corps volunteers. I heard that as a call. What followed seemed incredibly slow at the time, but remarkably fast in retrospect. I immediately sent in my application to be a Peace Corps volunteer. I interviewed in December, received conditional acceptance in February, did mountains of paperwork and health checks, and got thousands of shots, and was finally accepted as an official Peace Corps trainee in June. And on August 19th, 2019, I met these people. Group 84, so called because we were the 84th group of Peace Corps volunteers to head to Tonga since Group 1 went in 1967. My cohort is the most diverse group of individuals I have ever been a part of. Male and female, young and old, well, 61 for me, There were a mixture of races and creeds and first languages. These people were and are a blessing in my life. Peace Corps works very hard to overcome the legacy of superiority that centuries of colonialism has inflicted on the world, although it didn't when it started. We spent lots of time talking about how to recognize when we were acting as if our way was the best, how to listen and learn from the people who had invited us to share a specific skill set. Tonga's core values are respect, humility, and loyalty. We were taught to practice them. During our training, the Prime Minister of Tonga died. His funeral procession was scheduled to go through Malapo, the village we were in. We spent 3 hours lining the road, dressed in formal black outfits. When the procession was spotted in the distance, we all knelt until the entire procession had passed, practicing what we were trying to learn. A little bit about Tonga. It is fairly close to Australia and New Zealand and consists of around 170 islands. New ones are being pushed up by volcanoes regularly, but old ones are occasionally overrun due to global warming. So the number is not exact and it changes regularly. The first inhabitants arrived somewhere between 1500 and 1000 BC. In the 12th century, the King of Tonga had an empire which included a number of nearby island groups. Dutch explorers visited briefly in the 17th century, but in Tonga, it is generally accepted that their history began in the 18th century when British explorer James Cook visited. As with most nations near the equator, the indigenous people of Tonga have dark skin. Their primary language, Tongan, is similar to other Polynesian languages like the Hawaiian language. And the country is known as the Friendly Islands. There are just over 100,000 Tongans altogether. The top picture is my host family. The lower one is my language group. For the first 6 weeks in country, we trainees lived with host families in Malapo, a small village on the main island of Tongatapu. We got together every day to study the language and culture of Tonga and the approach of the Peace Corps to our service. When not in classes, we hung out with our families. I lived with the local Free Church of Tonga pastor, his wife, daughter, and her children. Group 84 was divided into small learning groups for language study. The photo is of my group with our teacher on the day we were sworn in as volunteers. Learning the Tongan language was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I don't think I did it well. Malolele, hello. Kahoko hingoa kopeki. Oku oa tau uno ua. Oku o hawa mea meini. Oku oa nofo I lankaste. Oku oa nawe lankaste loto fale ako. Oku oa saia he ako hiva. I've actually translated some of those things to my current life. For instance, Lancaste aka Lancaste loto koa would basically translate to the Lancaster School of Prayer. There's 16 letters in the Tongan language, or as we sang, a e faha, I kala, mananya opasa, tu uva. Many of the words are built as compounds on common words. So fale ako is the word for school is made of the word for building, fale, and the word for study, ako. The fun and challenging part in Tongan is that the equivalent of the verb to be is whaka. So whaka Tongan means I am Tongan. Things in Tonga are both the same and different as they are in the US. Up in the left-hand corner, we notice that junk is just left out all over the place in Tonga. That's actually a picture taken outside of the hospital, the only hospital in the country. And there's just equipment laying around to rust. Um, Animals in Tonga wander around freely. The dogs are um, not safe. That one actually attacked me more than once on my walk to work. The pig belonged to my host family and joined us regularly for breakfast. And the cow was also a common sight, just laying along beside the road. There are no helicopter parents in Tonga. The little girl in the picture with the machete is about 8, and she's chopping a coconut with a machete. It was the first time I actually ate raw coconut in Tonga. She chopped it up and gave me a piece to eat. Water, fresh water in Tonga is rare. It's rainwater is stored, and that's what we drink. On the other hand, transportation, public transportation takes place in buses with loud pop music blasting. They're in terrible shape, and nearly everyone tries to drive, which means that traffic on the main island is terrible. Shopping's done at open air markets, roadside vendors, dark little stores with bars on the windows. And very rarely does a store or a market carry a single product line. Used clothing and other things from America are quite common from the street vendors, while the stores tend to have Asian and South Pacific merchandise. There is one big box store, Costco. It's extremely expensive, but the best place to get a taste of home. I hosted a Thanksgiving potluck for my fellow volunteers, and I got the turkey at Costco. It cost just under $100. Freedom of religion is in the Tongan Constitution, but it is adamantly a Christian nation. The official church, which is attended by the king and royal family, is Wesleyan. It tends to be high with amazing choirs. On the other hand, nearly everyone in those churches is barefoot. The Free Tongan Church features fire and brimstone preaching and singing that is louder than it is melodic. The Latter-day Saints and the Roman Catholics also have fairly large numbers. There's a scattering of other denominations. Sundays are legally recognized as Sabbath days. Everyone goes to church, eats an enormous meal, and then naps until evening services. School children all wear uniforms. Girls are required to have their hair in twin braids. The only difference between the schools are the colors of the uniform. At the high school level, well over half of the students attend a religious school. The bright orange uniforms are for Kolosia Tailulu, the grade 7 to 12 Free Tongan school, where I was assigned to be the librarian and English reading coordinator. English is the second official language of Tonga. All of the Peace Corps volunteers were involved in some aspect of teaching English. I could babble on about Tonga, my work there as an English language facilitator, the friends I made in the Peace Corps, rugby, the unimportance of time, the royal family, the place of Tonga in international relations, and a million other things, but I'd rather talk about what you'd like to hear. So why don't we start for questions? And
thank you so much, Peggy. That was wonderful. All right, so I'll start with a question. You mentioned that you do not speak the language very well, but you stayed there only 7 months, right?
Yeah.
So was the expectation that if you had stayed there for 27 months, you would have picked it up?
Yes, I had a tutor after the initial training. I had a tutor, one of the teachers at my school, and we met for half an hour every week to go over grammar. I had lots of words. I had little grammar.
Okay, and any famous folks from the Tonga that we should know about?
Not really. If you watched the Olympics, the last 3 Olympics, the Tonga delegation was led by a really attractive man covered in oil. Uh, but no, Tonga is a very small country. There is a golfer on the PGA Tour with a Tongan background, and there's some rugby players, but unless you follow rugby, you wouldn't know any of them.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to ask you to unshare so that I can see more folks.
Okay.
That's okay with you. Thanks so much.
I'm using 2 screens, so it takes a while to get the mouse moved.
Sure.
All right.
There we go. All right, now I'll open it up to questions. China.
I thank you first to the council for allowing such a wonderful presentation. Peggy, thank you very much. We got a chance to speak briefly on several trips, and you came to rescue me from Virginia, so thank you. So I know that like some of our conversation has been about your love of adventure, or like this part of your life, just kind of like being free and doing what you're led to do. This being a cross-cultural experience for you, was there anything that you had trepidation about, and was there any pleasant surprises that really built your formation?
I went in open enough that the only thing I was worried about was how far I was from my family. I wasn't worried about who I would meet or what I would do. The thing that surprised me most, and my personal biggest cross-cultural experience, was the group of volunteers that I was with. I'm a 61-year-old white woman, 62. I had never been in a group as diverse as the group I was in, and I became very close to people whose backgrounds were completely different from mine, and I learned the things. I mean, I'd heard of microaggression, but I'd never understood it until I lived with people who lived with microaggression. I got so much from that. Yeah.
As you know, Peggy, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in an island nation as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious what you learned about the United States by being in Tonga.
One of the things we're supposed to do at Peace Corps is bring the United States to the country we serve and bring the country we serve to the United States. One of the things I learned was that they give us too much respect. In some ways, the people of Tonga have bought into the cultural superiority thing that America has pushed forever and ever. People wanted to talk about, oh, we have a president, that's wonderful. Well, I was thinking one of the reasons I'm here is to get away from the president we've got. They're a monarchy. And the popular vote really doesn't count for much. Democracy does not exist in Tonga, and many people wish it did. But generally, they thought America was wonderful, and they all wanted to go. And in fact, a significant number of Tongans live in the United States and send money home.
Ms. O'Kane,
Mhm.
my name is Chandola Tillman, And I have a question concerning the curriculum in the school system there. Are there likenesses with the curriculums that you have been exposed to in our school systems here in the United States? And what are the parallels, if any, that you could see when you were there?
Well, the same basic subjects were taught, but they were taught from the Tongan South Pacific perspective. So the histories were of the South Pacific, not of Europe or North America, which is what we do here. English is the children start school at 5 in first grade. They are only supposed to be getting Tongan in first through third grade, and then in fourth grade, English is introduced. But a lot of the teachers introduce English right away anyway. The schools lack good science labs. They lack good libraries. The books in the libraries were completely out of date in many cases. And in the primary schools, the libraries consisted of some books in a teacher's room. In sixth grade, all of the students take a test that determines whether they go on to high school or not. The top 3 or 4 high schools in the nation set what they'll take as a minimum score, and they only take students who make that score. And then, and students have to pick which high school they want to go to, if they want to go at all. The majority of the high schools are religious, not public, so they have to pay tuition to go to them. The tertiary schools are pretty much community colleges. And that's where you go for your teaching credential or your nursing degree. There really aren't any universities in Tonga, so you wind up going to New Zealand or Australia. Those are the primary countries for further education.
Okay. Thank you. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I'll jump in, Peggy, again. You started with the Sufi meditation about following the way. Is that why you left for San Francisco and then went back to Maine and then to the Tonga?
Yep. I learned the meditation from a dear friend who was a Sufi master and an Episcopal priest. And I hit a crossroads in my life where I could either stay in San Francisco with one of my 3 children while my ex and the other 2 kids moved to Maine, or I could quit my well-compensated, extremely stressful job and move to a state I'd never been to before. And the meditation helped me make the decision. And it helped me, it has helped me in every time I've been trying to figure out, do I keep doing what I'm doing or am I ready to do something else? It brought me here.
What kind of religious community were you yourself a part of while you were in Tonga, if any?
I was because the school that I was at was sponsored by the Free Tongan Church. I was involved in the Free Tongan Church. I'm convinced that if I could understand the sermons, I would not have stayed. You could tell by the face that the ministers almost never smiled while giving sermons, which seemed to me not to be the kind of religion I wanted to be mostly involved with. And the music was much better at the Wesleyan churches. I didn't go every Sunday, but someone from my school picked me up and took me to a church most weeks. At the opening ceremony, when we first got to Tonga, got to the town of Malapa where we were going to stay, there was a big service at the Wesleyan Church, and the choir sang, "For the voice of the Lord has spoken it, a cappella in Tongan." And it was one of the, I mean, it was obviously what they were singing. It was so good. One of my goals had been to join a choir, but again, didn't have time to get that started.
Mhm.
Where were most of your cohort members from? Where did you all hail from?
All over the US. There were people from Texas and Tennessee and Mississippi and South Carolina and Michigan, and I really all over the US. Of the 32 of us, 25 were recent college grads. There were a couple of people who were middle age, well, not middle age, early 30s career transitioning, but most of it was people who wanted to learn more about teaching. There were a lot of people with teaching backgrounds. There were a lot of people who chose Peace Corps instead of missionary work. We're quite open that that's what they were doing. They were doing a Peace Corps stint instead of a missionary stint for a couple of years. One woman who had spent most of her life in India, another who had lived in Saudi Arabia for high school. Just lots of interesting backgrounds.
Thank you. I can see why the new grads would go there to teach, because teaching is very difficult to break in here.
Mm-hmm.
And that would give one access and skills that when they come back, they would have a better command.
Well, not only that, but if you complete the full 24 months of teaching, you're ESL certified.
I was wondering about that. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. One of my best friends, Kara from Mississippi, had just graduated from Mississippi State and wanted to leave Mississippi. That was her big goal. And when we got back, she turned around and joined AmeriCorps and is now in Anchorage.
Okay. Okay.
She just didn't want to go home, huh?
She didn't want to go back to Mississippi.
Sounds like a great opportunity to travel.
It is, or it was.
Would you do it again?
I would have done it if I had to do it over again. I would do it again. But the timing was just right. My older grandson would have been in high school when I finished, and I would have been 6 months shy of full retirement age. So all of those things would have fallen together in a way that they wouldn't fall together if I were to do it now. So I don't think I won't be reapplying.
Would you encourage recent college graduates to?
Oh, absolutely. The opportunity, the Army slogan, travel to interesting places, meet interesting people and kill them. Well, Peace Corps travel to interesting places, meet wonderful people, and help make lives better. What's not to like? If you aren't tied down, if you have that freedom to go, it's wonderful. Student loans are deferred. There are lots of graduate school scholarships that are open only to Peace Corps people. It was a really good way. And the work the Peace Corps is conscientiously doing to change the model of helping people in other countries is important to learn. We spent a lot of time talking about, there's probably some kid in Africa who watches all the news about all of the shooting in America and thinks, oh, I could go to America and fix that. I could convince all those people to stop shooting people. And what difference is it when we go to another country and say, oh, I see your problems, I can fix it for you. Their problems are just as complex as our problems, and we're not going to solve them. But we have skills that we can bring that they want. And Peace Corps now only goes into countries that they've been invited to, and they go to provide specific services that are asked for. So Tonga wanted English teachers. That's all they wanted. They didn't want any business development. They didn't want any youth development. They wanted English teachers. So those are the only people who went. Whereas back in the mid 60s, my brother, who we grew up on a farm in Appalachia, went to India to a tropical climate and tried to teach them how to farm, just like he had farmed as a kid, because he was an American. He knew best.
The requirement that the government ask for particular skills was in place when I was a volunteer, 83 to 85. But I had the interesting experience of arriving there at just about the same time that the US invaded Grenada. And so people would ask us if we were the peacekeeping force, like the people who went to Grenada, and we were like, no, we're Peace Corps. But it was really hard to explain. I mean, we had no weapons in sight, but it was an interesting view onto the way America is perceived in different parts of the world.
In Tongan, the word for volunteer is pisikoa. So Peace Corps means volunteer in Tongan.
That's cool.
That's interesting.
What was your favorite thing to eat there?
Oh, kumala, purple sweet potatoes. Of course, the bananas were a close second. You know how you go out for a hike in the woods and you pick the berries and eat them? In Tonga, you go out for a hike in the woods and you pick a banana and eat it. So sweet and fresh and wonderful. But the purple sweet potatoes were just amazing.
Were the bananas the small ones?
Actually, they were about
a big one.
5 inches and really big around. It was just completely different species. Fresh pineapple was also incredible. I was surprised at how little fish there was, given that we were on an island. It turns out that most of the fish is only sold at a local market, and you got to get there at 6 in the morning. And the people who are street vendors go and buy the fish, and then they stand around outside on street corners and sell you fish during the day. So I decided not to eat much fish.
How was the weather? Did it rain a lot?
No, it didn't. It didn't rain nearly as much. They were actually in a drought while I was there. We did have one typhoon while I was there, but when it rains, schools are closed because the roads aren't paved and the kids all walk to school. But yeah, it didn't rain nearly as much as I had expected. But it's, it's summer there now and really hot.
Peggy, you mentioned the prices, the exorbitant prices in the more commercial supermarket.
Mhm.
So the turkey, why was the turkey so expensive?
Because it's not a commodity food there. It's, it's the same as why is lobster so much more expensive here than it is in Maine? By the way, Maine lobster is way better than South Pacific lobster. Yeah, I mean, there were probably only, in this huge store, there weren't more than 20 turkeys for sale at Thanksgiving time. And yeah.
What about chicken? Is chicken the same?
No, chicken's really easy and common. You're not encouraged to wring the neck of your neighbor's chickens who are up all night crowing, but they wander around. I mean, literally, there are chickens everywhere, and people do wring their own chickens' necks and serve them to you. The weird thing was things like lamb. Lamb was very easy to find, but it was lamb necks, which isn't a cut we ever see in the United States. They were the cuts that New Zealand couldn't ship to other countries, so they shipped them to Tonga. But I ate lamb probably every week.
Thank you.
How would you describe the people? Generally speaking, are they typical island people, relaxed, just enjoying life, or no?
Yeah. The concept of time is very fluid. You hang out. If you're hanging out with somebody, it doesn't matter if you're supposed to be meeting up with somebody else now. You're still hanging out with the person you're hanging out with. Helpful, incredibly helpful. My host sister didn't like to go anywhere by herself, even when she was, one of her things they agreed to do when they agreed to be a host family was to, take me around and show me the sights. But if ever I expressed an interest in going anywhere, she would find somebody else to go with us. On one occasion, we went to the official rainforest, and she hadn't been there before. It's a national park. Prince Harry opened it. So it's not far from the campus of one of the really elite high schools. So as we're driving across the campus, she waved to a student and made this guy get in the car and go with us. And they're speaking in Tongan, so I don't know what they're talking about. I assumed, oh, this is a friend, a neighbor, a relative. Turns out, had never met the kid before. She had no idea who he was. He had no idea who we were. But I was a Palangi. I was an old Palangi, an old white woman. So I needed to be escorted. So when I finally figured out what was going on, I cut my visit to the rainforest short. But yeah, if somebody asks you for something, you do it. They do have beggars on the street in the main city. All of them go home at night to their family home. It's not like they live on the street. It's just they earn their living by begging on the street, and people give them money all the time.
And what's the main source of income there?
There really isn't one. The main source of income is money sent home. People go to Australia and pick crops. There's, the government is the only major employer. Lots of subsistence farming, and a decent sized tourist industry. but there's nothing that they make for export in any volume.
So if they're not that rich, and you said there were about 170 islands in total,
Mhm.
how does the government control all those islands?
Well, only about 40 of them are populated. Over half of the population lives on Tonga Tapu, which is the big island of the, and the nobility own all the land. So you might own your house, but you don't own the land it's sitting on. And so there's a feudal system going on, but nobody talks about it. And people take care of each other.
Do multiple families live together?
Oh, yeah. While I was staying in Malapo, while theoretically there was only that core group of people who lived at the house, there would be days when I'd get up and there'd be 6 people sleeping in the living room on the floor. There's a very, very odd adoption thing going on in Tonga where the head of the family, the head of the clan family, can decide to give somebody's baby to somebody else to raise. So one of my teachers, her youngest child, she had 4 children. Her youngest child was given to her older brother, whose wife couldn't have children, to be their kid, not her kid. So I mean, all the families are intermingled, but there's that other also weird who decides, makes the decisions going on.
So are men head of the household officially, or?
Yes, men are head of the household. Women are expected to defer. There are things women are not supposed to do, like go for walks by themselves in the woods, which I did anyway. But it is a very male-dominated society. Except for the laitees. The laitees are transsexual men who live as women, but there's no homosexuality in Tonga. Ask anybody who's from Tonga, and they'll tell you there's no homosexuality at all. There's just this class of people who are men who live as women, and they're very common, and nobody blinks an eye at someone choosing to live that lifestyle. But at the same time, they swear up and down that there is no homosexuality in the country.
Is that because of the religion or just the tradition?
Yes, religion. There's recently been a pushback against the laïcs by a couple of startup evangelical churches that are funded by US evangelical groups.
Anybody? We have about 5 more minutes. Go ahead, Calvin.
That's something that I know in the United Methodist Church that has happened, is that conservative groups will go and try and plant their theology into a place. And I don't think it's helpful, because like you were saying, not to try and to say, I need to help you or I need to fix you. And that's something that I've had to even take into consideration in my current church, because I have many people with different beliefs. I pastor a progressive church. So it's much different, because it's like, I hear where they're saying things, and it's like, I have to hear them and not just say, well, this is our belief and we're just going to stick to that, because that's oppressing them, and that's not good.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I am currently unchurched and have
Mhm.
been for over a decade, having grown up first Roman Catholic and then been Episcopalian and then been Methodist, and now I don't go to church. While I was in Tonga, I went to church, not because of my relationship with God, but because of my relationship with people. My
Mm.
relationship with God is separate from my relationship with churches.
Did that in any way change your relationship with God?
Oh no. Um, the wonders of his works, her works, are, it's amazing how beautiful the world is. And Tonga is a particularly beautiful part of the world. And seeing people love and respect one another in families, and just keeps, yeah, God is here. Um, whether God is in church, I think is up for question, but God is. And my time in Tonga contributed to that knowledge.
Jen, were you going to ask?
Me?
You don't have to. I thought you
Oh,
were going
I
to
thought
ask.
you were leading into a specific question.
No.
I mean, my question always goes back to like, can married people do this? Because,
Yes.
oh, really?
Yes.
I just assumed the answer was no. So I'm like, oh, let me
Oh,
know.
no. In
Richie is
fact,
in trouble.
Well, I tried to sign us up before we had children. I tried to sign us up to join a monastery for married people. So once
Yeah.
our children are older, I'm not crossed this off the list, but I didn't know that you could do it as a married.
And depending on where you go with the Peace Corps, you either need to have similar skill set or completely different skill sets. I mean, there are couples where one person teaches and the other does business development or agriculture or something, but are in the same country together. There was one married couple in our group. Well, not in the group ahead of mine. And
At
they
the
shared a
time I
house.
did it- At the time I did it, you could not have dependents.
Yeah.
Your kids needed to be old enough to be on their own, or your parents needed not to have you tending to them. I mean, so the kind of two biggest groups were people fairly young in their career, and then people who were newly retired, sort of your stage of life of
Yeah.
doing something while you're free to go.
Yeah. My brother and his wife had their first child while they were in the Peace Corps. Bobby now lives in Germany and is married to a woman from France, and they adopted a child from Russia. So he got a good international start on life.
Mhm. Now, if someone is gay, lesbian, or bisexual, does that make them at risk to go into Peace Corps, or do they take that into consideration in the places where they are sent?
They take that into consideration. Peace Corps has a very strong policy of privacy.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a couple of out people in my group, and there were a couple of in people in my group, and it was all the same. But again, when I was listing places that I wanted to go, I would have refused to go anywhere in the Middle East because I'm a feminist, and I wouldn't have been able to not be a feminist. So yes, that is taken into consideration.
Well, it's 8 o'clock, and I guess we have to stop because I don't think Dr. Carey or Dr. Thayer will accept this as an excuse not to finish our papers.
Ah, gee, I wish I had papers to write, not.
Well,
Be done. I mean, gosh, brushing them up.
well, Peggy, I thank you so much on behalf
All
of
right.
the SCC and the school. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
thank you
It
everyone
was a
for
pleasure.
joining
Thank
us.
you very much.
All right. I'll
Yeah.
see you all soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care. Finish your papers.